Look at the toolkit of a modern corporate strategist. It functions as a complex dashboard of interconnected models used to dictate billion-dollar resource allocations. We use Bayesian structural analyses to measure industry attractiveness. We rely on the BCG Matrix to balance corporate portfolios and apply competitive rivalry models to anticipate competitor moves. We apply these frameworks as though they are independent inventions, built by contemporary thinkers in the late 20th century, completely isolated from the economic physics beneath them. But these specialized models all grow from a single axiomatic root system, defined by a Scottish moral philosopher named Adam Smith. The economic DNA of modern global enterprise was mapped here, exactly as the world stood on the threshold of the Industrial Revolution in 1776. To understand how modern corporate capabilities actually work, we have to excavate the Smthian axioms that dictate their structural integrity. Applying tools like Porter's 5 forces without understanding the soil they sit on leaves a firm blind to the actual physics of the market. When macroeconomic conditions shift, a strategy built only on surface-level models will fail. The entire structure of economic advantage begins with a single variable, the isolated task. Smith illustrated this by comparing a single generalist worker, capable of producing maybe 20 pins a day, against an assembly line where the work is divided among 10 specialists. Together, they output 48,000 units. This exponential productivity gain comes from 3 mechanical drivers. Specialization increases the dexterity of each worker through repetition. It eliminates the time lost transitioning between different tasks. And a worker confined to a single operation is highly likely to invent specialized tools to speed up that specific job. 2 centuries later, the Boston Consulting Group formalized this exact mechanism into a core pillar of corporate strategy. This graph illustrates the BCG Experience Curve. It tracks the empirical rule that as cumulative production volume increases, unit costs systematically decline. As an organization repeats a process at massive scale, it mathematically drives down its cost basis through continuous learning, process refinement, and task isolation. The strategic advantages we attribute to early movers and massive market share are simply the inevitable result of Smithian volume generating Smithian dexterity. If dividing labor guarantees higher productivity, a firm should logically divide tasks endlessly to achieve absolute efficiency. But Smith identified a strict mathematical limit. The division of labor is constrained by the extent of the market. This visualization maps market radius against task specialization. Deep specialization requires a massive aggregated pool of demand to economically justify its narrow focus. A small village can only support a generalist blacksmith, while a global market can support a factory dedicated to manufacturing a single microchip component. Digital platforms, containerized shipping, and global value chains function by artificially extending this market radius. They aggregate fragmented global demand, which supports deeper, hyper-specialized production networks. This creates a severe structural vulnerability. Geopolitical shifts, like tariffs, trade wars, and deglobalization, artificially shrink the effective market radius. When the market boundary contracts, the volume of demand drops below the threshold required to sustain highly optimized operations. Those specific capabilities become instantly uneconomic. Corporate strategists cannot aggressively specialize their supply chains without securing the macroeconomic scale required to absorb the output. Scale and specialization rise and fall together. Smith argued that decentralized markets perfectly coordinate specialized labor through price signals, yet the modern economy is dominated by massive corporate hierarchies. Instead of relying on open exchange, these megafirms use the deliberate authority of professional management, what Alfred Chandler called the visible hand, to organize production internally. Economists like Ronald Coase and Oliver Williamson resolved this paradox by developing transaction cost economics. This balance scale tracks the frictions of external commerce. Relying on the open market requires a firm to absorb search costs to find suppliers, legal costs to negotiate contracts, and constant monitoring costs to guard against opportunistic behavior. When the combined weight of these transaction costs exceeds the productivity benefits of external specialization, the firm must internalize the activity. The boundary of the organization expands to absorb the friction. This calculation drives every modern make or buy decision. It dictates vertical integration strategies, and determines if an international expansion relies on local partnerships or wholly owned subsidiaries. The boundary of a firm is a calculated perimeter, drawn right where market friction makes Smthian specialization too expensive to leave to outsiders. The most dangerous miscalculation a strategist can make is misreading the invisible hand as a blank check for absolute self-interest. Without institutional constraints, profit-seeking abandons productivity and devolves into systemic predation, fraud, and resource extraction. 17 years before his economic treatise, Smith published The Theory of Moral Sentiments. He used it to establish the mandatory operating conditions required for his subsequent economic theories to function at all. Decentralized markets only yield social prosperity when participants operate under the rule of law, face meaningful competition, and are bound by a shared moral framework that punishes exploitative behavior. Smith directed intense hostility toward merchants who lobbied for protectionist tariffs, monopolies, or regulatory capture. He understood these tactics were designed specifically to escape the discipline of a competitive market. The contemporary focus on environmental, social, and governance principles, along with stakeholder theory, reflects this exact requirement. Demanding ethical character from corporate entities is a return to the strict structural baseline Smith mathematically required for a market system to survive long-term. The division of labor, the physical limits of the market, the threshold of transaction costs, and the necessity of institutional morality. These are the load-bearing pillars of competitive advantage. The giants of modern strategy built directly on top of them. Bain refined Smith's requirement for competition into structural industry analysis. Chamberlain mapped how firms generate pricing power through brand differentiation. And where Smith left a static view of market equilibrium, Joseph Schumpeter introduced the dynamic engine of entrepreneurial innovation, explaining how new technologies constantly destroy and rebuild the productive structure. The analytical frameworks populating a strategist's dashboard remain essential blueprints for navigating corporate competition. But a strategic blueprint is useless if you ignore the economic physics of the site you are building on. The ultimate job of a strategic manager is to operate as a deep soil architect, continuously interrogating the underlying economic physics that dictate whether there